you have to totally change the formulation for an ink to be delivered in a piece of felt versus something that you can spray. The result, though, is very, very cool. So I'm just going to take some paper, and you can work on really anything porous when it comes to working with distress. Everything from watercolor cardstock to mixed media heavy stock to kind of any kind of paper. You want to avoid plastics like Yupo, right? Yupo won't really work well with these kind of inks. They'll do their thing and then they'll wipe clean, but let's just take this down from an ink pad, right? So an ink pad's just going to give us that smush, that kind of basic thing, or we can also go in and blend, whether it's with a blending tool or a blending brush, we can get kind of that soft, creamy look. And the thing about these inks is because it is a dye and pigment fusion, we get this really rich coloration, right? But the thing about working with an ink pad also is that we have the ability to stamp. So you can take any of your images, you can put it on your ink pad, and you can stamp those crisp lines with an ink pad. You can't get that with something fluid, right? It's just going to be too liquid and just kind of too playful, if you will. If you have paper covered in oxide and you spray it, we're going to get some reaction. The thing about this is that this is going to start to oxidize as soon as it gets wet. We're going to see those water drops start to form, and that's because right now that dye and pigment is starting to separate. We can see those little outlines. And you see those little outlines around each dot? That's that dye and pigment separating. And then, of course, if we dry it, you'll really start seeing that oxidation occur. It kind of gets that light effect, if you will. And the thing about oxide is the more water you add, the more it will oxidize. So that's the gist of an ink pad. But when we deliver it in a spray bottle, oh my God, totally different. And you'll see the difference. That's why I like to demo it that way. A couple of things to note with a spray. These guys need to be shaken up. If you see the kind of the side of the bottle, I'll show where the label connects, where they don't want you to see. They did their best to wrap it, but I think it's important. They're like, this part is ugly, don't show them. I'm like, you need to see it. You can see down here, here is that pigment, and all the way up there is dye. So before you use this, you have to mix it up, you have to shake it. Now with a spray bottle, because it's got that opening, you know, we kind of say shake side to side just so you can swirl it. It's not because it's going to foam, it's not because it's going to do anything wrong, it's just because if you shake it up and down, some of that ink could leak out the neck of the bottle. I don't have time for that. So
because the mica will go into the...
No, because this isn't mica.
Oh, it's not.
No.
So that's
Oh, wow, those are beautiful. It's the first time I've seen them. Talk about that. We're talking about oxide sprays right now.
No
See?
distractions.
She totally wants to. Yeah, let
It
me just take some of these
out
off.
when you're shaking it.
It
Ask
does.
me how I know.
Yeah, I know. I tried to warn you.
You did.
I did. So what's really important, you can take a paper towel, some sort of cloth, that's the way I like to do it, and just cover the nozzle, and then you can just shake it up, right?
Sweet.
Because this way, if any ink is going to go out, it's just going to get caught in the towel. These haven't been used yet, so I should be okay. But once I kind of prime the pump, that's when you have to worry about it. But you can see that they mix up really, really quick, right? You don't have to wait till all of that stuff is mixed in. It has a mixing ball. As long as you hear that shake around, you're ready to go. And every time you use it, it is a good idea just to give it a little shake. So once they're like mixed up, let's say you're working on a project and you shake them and you go from color to color, I would just do this. That's enough to kind of make sure that that dye and pigment is really floating around. That's what it's all about. So it's not so much a clogging issue. It's just the fact that when it comes to oxide, the beauty is that dye and pigment. So if you don't keep it mixed, you're going to end up getting either pigment or just dye. Make sense? All right, so let's talk about how it looks on a surface. And I'm just going to work here on a media mat. Let me kind of clear that area. So I'm just going to go in and spray it. And you can see right away it's got beautiful coverage, beautiful opacity, almost like a spray paint. And when you layer a color on a color, so you can see Cracked Pistachio over Mermaid Lagoon, you can see that that green sits right on top of that blue. If these were just translucent dyes like our spray stain, we wouldn't see that color separation. We would have seen a new color, which would have been pretty. But the cool thing about working with a pigment spray now is that when we layer colors, you actually see that they're layered. You don't necessarily need to dry them in between, but you can, depending on what you're going for. So here I'm just going to dry this, just so you can see the spray as it is, because it's still going to be reactive with water. After all, it's an oxide. But just because it's reactive with water doesn't mean you always have to use it with water. That's the thing about distress also. So you can see it gives it, I'm going to say kind of a chalky appearance, but it's really just that kind of oxidation. We don't have that reaction yet because we haven't added water, but you can see where we've sprayed it, how we have that different color blend, right? But when we add water, we're still going to get that magic. We're going to get everything that these do, but now we get to choose how we want that to happen and when. that when we add big drips of water, you're going to see that dye and pigment separate even more than this, because the intensity of a spray, that's really why a lot of mixed media artists love spray. It gives it more intensity, more coverage, quicker, right? If we had to cover an entire journal page by using an ink pad and a blending tool, that's going to take a while. But because I can just spray this on now, we get a much more fluid nature of our colorants too. Just look at the difference side by side as far as that creamy blend, but also kind of that fluid nature. So is there an either or? No, and I think sometimes when we release new art mediums, people go, oh, I can have this instead of this. It's like, no, we never want to give you a product so you have this instead of this. We want to give you a product that says, here's another way to apply or deliver that medium, right? Now the thing about this stuff, of course, because it is a dye and pigment, it's a little bit messier to clean up. So you want to work on a media mat, a craft sheet, you can work with a splat box, you can clean that up. But the nice thing also is that we can also mix our mediums. That's what I'm going to share with you as well. It's always very cool when we have different products. Let's take some other colors. So we'll take this, we'll take this. We can mix dyes, these are spray stains, with pigment and dye, which are oxide sprays. We'll get something completely different. So this guy, now that I've already shaken it up officially, I can now just give it a little mix, and I can spray some of that color. Then I can go in with the spray stain. Now the spray stain, remember, this is just going to be just full-on dye. And I'm just going to go in, because I've added dye and some pigment, and I can create a totally different background, right? So remember, this was a really bright color, but because I mixed it with a dye, it's completely altering my background. Now let me dry it, because that's when you see what's going on, what's happening. Trying to get out of camera view. It's tough to work. All right, now as I'm drying stuff, the thing about working with different fluid inks is you're always going to have what I call the sludge factor, right? You're going to have that on there. If it looks like sludge, it dries like sludge. So if you don't want it there, just tap that with something porous, and the color will just fill in the blanks. So here's what you're going to see happens when this dries. You're going to see that where I have that concentration of oxide, it's oxidizing, and where I just have the dye, it is translucent, right? Because pigment always dominates dye. So it doesn't matter what you put on top of it, even if this dried and I put another layer of ink, that pigment is always going to rise to the top. Pigment dominates dye at all times. Well, yeah. I'm a 5-year-old there. I'm like, why? Why is this happening? Tell me why. And if I did this, what about this? But now I'm just one of those doers. I just do it and I try to figure it out myself. But having different mediums, and I think that's what's so exciting about educating people on inks, is that you think that you just need one thing and you're going to be good, but when you start playing around with what you already have, even if we went in and added a significant amount of water up here, we can get more of that color to go right down over that dye, and we can still get that dye to react. It's distress after all. That's the beauty of distress. Distress gets better with water. Most water-based inks, if you add a significant amount of water, your color starts to dissipate, right? Like a watercolor, right? We know if we want a lighter color, we just keep adding more water. Well, with distress, if you keep adding more water, you're gonna get more color, right? Which is cool, because that's what I like about doing backgrounds. I like the fact that I don't have to use tons and tons of ink to get a beautiful background. I can play around simply by adding layers of water. But you can see that these sprays are just, they are ridiculous. So let's talk about some effects without you seeing the same thing over and over. I'm just gonna leave this here. I'm gonna let that air dry just because I'm bored. Sometimes I just don't want to wait for it to dry. But I'm just going to show you some things that I showed during Facebook Live. Obviously, oxide sprays are going to allow us to now put ink over darker surfaces, right? So we can spray